Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Conscious Grief Series 5. And today I am joined by Dominic Murgido, who is a writer, an editor, a commentator, and a highly regarded public speaker. So we're very, very lucky to be joined by Dominic today. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Tara. It's an honor. It's a true honor to be here.
Well, you and I have exchanged emails over maybe the course of the last year, but this is the first time we've actually properly met. So it's really, really wonderful to connect and have you here and to talk about all the amazing work that you have done and produced, because you are an author several times over and you've just released a new book, which we're going to talk about today. And, well, we have all of, you created all of this, from a very, very sad and tragic circumstance. And, this is often this sort of strange scenario that we find ourselves in when I interview people about grief, that despite all the amazing work that you've done, obviously you would rather still have your wife here and not probably be a commentator on this subject. But maybe first of all, you would like to introduce yourself and your work and what happened to Susan and what brought you to this place.
Hey, thank you so much. Yes, I'm Dominic Murgido. I am founder of Sud Spirit Bereavement Support Group for the sudden unexpected death of a spouse. My life was a whole different thing before my wife had passed away, and things have just changed for me. So maybe the best way to start this is to tell you what exactly happened. And basically, on a January day, just turning 18 years ago, she was on her way to work and she was struck by another vehicle at an intersection and killed immediately by the driver who was speeding, ran a red light, and was distracted. And that distracted driver at that very moment took the wife that I loved, my soulmate, away from me. And myself, I think, died a little that day as well. The strangest thing about that accident is the fact that I wish there was another way I found out about it, because I didn't get a phone call. Nobody came and knocked on the door at my office. But the tragedy of this is I came across the accident scene, and that's how I knew what happened to her. And that in itself, the trauma associated with what I saw in front of me, all the first responder vehicles, the flashing lights, the caution tape, firemen, policemen, ambulance. It's something that stayed with me for a very long time. And for about 10 years, I suffered PTSD from it. Because every time I saw an accident somewhere or anything close to that scene that I observed the day she died, I would just get anxiety ridden. I would get traumatized. And I had to go through an anxiety attack in order to come out of it 10, 15 minutes later. But how do you explain the loss of somebody you truly love in such a sudden way? And the way it affected me was something of, my world just exploded. I turned upside down. I didn't know what to do, where to go. I was at a loss for my life going forward. And unfortunately, the day this accident happened was just 3 days after her birthday. So we just celebrated her 48th birthday. And 3 days later, she's gone. So I immediately knew I needed help. I turned to professional therapy, which was a lifesaver for me. And I started going to support groups. And in doing the support groups, They were helpful to me because I was surrounded by other people that lost somebody they loved, whether it be a mother, a father, a brother, a sister. And there were a few there that lost their spouses as well. And that general support group helped me a little bit. And as I was going through it, I find myself connecting to those that lost their spouses as we left the meeting for the evening, as we were walking to our vehicles, and we started communicating. And then we started like saying, wow, what you said back there, I really can identify with, or I felt that way too, or this is what I'm dealing with. And I started thinking to myself that, wow, maybe there should be a support group for just those that lost a spouse, suddenly and unexpectedly, and perhaps just general loss of a spouse that people can get together. So I started looking for one to see if I can get myself involved in that group. I just couldn't find any. There was nothing out there for that at that time. So I was talking to my therapist at one session, telling him my frustration and trying to find a more specialized group. And he looked at me square in the eye and he says to me, well, if you can't find one, why don't you start one? And I'm like, what do I know about doing a support group? I said, I'm not a professional therapist or counselor. How could I possibly help other people? And he looked at me and he said, you're living through it. You're going through it yourself. He said, my goodness, he said, what better person to talk to others about the grief that you're feeling than a person going through the actual grief? And that's how the beginning of Sud Spirit started 2 years after Sue, my wife Sue, died. I developed the group, and it's free and it's no registration. People come and go as they please. And we meet once a month, and it never ends. It never closes. It just goes on and on and on. And people can come and go as they please whenever they feel like the need to come. And we just sit and we talk and we open up, and it's an open forum. And I give out handouts. I do a newsletter that comes out seasonally. I write in that newsletter different things I call reflections, passages. And I think starting that support group helped me in more ways for myself. And then I started becoming delighted of how many people started reacting to that support group, saying, this really got me through a bad time. This really helped me share my feelings with other people. And I wasn't judged. I felt safe there. I was able to cry there. And it was so much rewarding to me to see the amount of people that it was inspiring and helping people. Mm. And that group continues to this day. It's now 16 years that I've been doing it and writing that newsletter and continuing to help people.
Well, that is amazing, Dominic. And I do think that, well, first of all, I just loved, the getting into community and for people to have a space, like you say, to feel safe and held and supported, and how important that is for our grief, to be witnessed, to be validated, and then bringing together people who have the same type of loss as well, which can be, really important to have a very similar experience, to go even deeper and feel even more kind of seen and heard. So that's really, really powerful place for people to know about. And I know that, the circumstance with your wife's death being a car accident and being complicated because there was somebody else driving a car who wasn't present and was distracted. And that piece was very, very difficult for you to reconcile. And I've seen you speak on something else that I watched on YouTube, and you expressed how angry you were with that person, and that wasn't a part of your personality or that you really kind of knew almost before that. So perhaps you'd like to speak more to this situation and what helped you get through that anger.
Yeah, absolutely, Tara. I was experiencing something that was so buried within me. And it was an anger, perhaps. And I almost hate to say the word, but I realized, and it took me a while to realize this, but I actually had almost a little bit of a hatred toward the driver for basically taking the life of my wife and putting me in the situation of a life now without her. And I just felt there was something that I wasn't dealing with. And this feeling was developing from the day it happened, but I knew I was angry, but I didn't know how angry I was to the point that it stayed in my subconscious. And it took, it took years actually, and it took a relocation. It took me to move away from my current home at the time and to go to another state, retire from a job I had for 30 years, and just do something totally different, just to get away from it all. And that move, although it only lasted 3 years till I moved back, but that move was a catalyst for me to identify the anger I had for this gentleman and be able to deal with the fact that I had to get past that. Because if I didn't get past that, I was never going to go move forward. And I was just harboring this anger. So being in another state, doing another thing, and just trying to, again, in therapy, another support group I was involved in, and then, of course, my own, by praying and by meditating about it, I got to a point that I realized in order for me to move forward, I had to forgive him. And I got to tell you, it takes a lot to forgive somebody that you don't know, you've never met, that took a life away from you. A lot. I mean, forgiveness isn't easy. You really have to come to terms within yourself, your soul, your heart, to be able to forgive somebody like that. And it took me, well, it took almost 6 years for me to realize it, and another 6 to 9 months to just pray about it, to think about it, to meditate about it, to be at one with myself, to be at peace with myself, to finally say and wholeheartedly agree that I'm going to forgive him. And I did that. I was able to do that. And I can't describe the incredible feeling that I received after doing that, because I felt so much relief. I felt renewed. I felt that I was a new person. I felt that going forward now, by letting that behind me and moving forward by forgiving him, I was able to go to the next step in my life and to feel better about it.
Wow. This is such a powerful story and very, very inspiring one. And what I really appreciate about this process is the length of time that it took, because,
Yeah.
a lot of people will say, and you'll hear like, you need to forgive somebody because, it's only you that it's damaging and holding back. And, we can know these ideas, but we can't just forgive somebody. Like you say, I mean, the circumstances were very extreme here, but we have to take the time, and we have to, really do it when it's authentic to ourselves. We can't do it because we want the progress and we want to let something go. It's very much an organic process to forgive somebody, and it can take a long time. And I think also the fact that you moved away is interesting to me as well, because sometimes I think moving away, you know, it can help us to process things. And, you know, being out of our normal environment, away, you know, perhaps spending more time on alone. You know, this actually was my experience when I moved to LA, and being completely away from my normal life. And I mean, I was in a program which was going deeply into our issues, but that's when I started my conscious grieving, because I wasn't in my day-to-day life, which can be so busy and chaotic and, you know, full of the usual stimulation and distractions that we usually have. So I don't know, I just feel like for some people who might be considering moving away or getting a change in country or city, that actually it can be a very supportive thing. And some people might think, oh, you're running away. You're not, you know, you're not leaning into the grief, or you know, it's not a solution. Well, we're the only ones that know, and we can only follow our hearts, right?
That's so true. And I think I look upon, in hindsight, I look back at that time and I think, I don't know if I never moved away, I don't know if I would have ever discovered the fact that I had this anger within me, and it was keeping me back. I really think that move helped me move forward. And had I not made the move, I would never be at the place I am now. Never. I would never. I mean, I still would have done the support group. There's no question, because that started before the move. But I still think that move gave me new perspective. Mm-hmm. That move gave me a new challenge, a new thing to go forward with from it. And it did its purpose. That I found what I had to do, and I did it, and I came back. And of course, one other thing to keep in mind, we haven't even mentioned yet, but a very key part of my grieving process was a dog. Mm-hmm. It was Sue's dog, my wife's dog, and his name was Hal. And she just got Hal 3 years before she died as a puppy. And they were inseparable. They went everywhere together. And she trained Hal with all kinds of training. She actually was certified as a therapy dog with Hal. And she would go to places to help others. And Hal would go and visit people less fortunate and bring a smile to their face. She loved doing that with that dog, loved it. And they both would come back from a visit and be smiling and be happy that they helped people. And, you know, it's funny because Hal then became my therapy dog from her training him to help others. It's kind of a really strange feeling, but what she did for Hal and what she loved doing, she passed Hal on to me. And now Hal was with me for the next 12 years, helping me with that move back, all that trauma, all the forgiveness, all my writing, my journaling. Hal was there, you know, till he passed away, unfortunately. But for 12 years, that dog was my rock. That dog was, in some ways, a small representation of her with me. And there were so many times that I felt such comfort and compassion from that dog. He was such an integral part of my grief journey. It's amazing.
And you've written a book about that.
Yes, Hal's prominently in my books. Yes.
Yeah.
He's in, the first book, Miss You Forever. There's 3 reflections about Hal that are pretty detailed about my feelings for him. And then in the second book, In a Heartbeat, I actually have a picture of Hal in that book. in his honor. And again, he's written all about in that second book as well. It's hard not to talk about my grief without Hal.
Well, that is amazing that, Susan left Hal to be your therapy dog. And I have a dog, and I think animals are amazing at supporting us.
Yes.
They really, truly are. And you mentioned there, we know you're a writer, but you mentioned journaling as well. And I'm a big
Yes.
journaler.
Yes. Journaling. I'll tell you, I never journaled ever. So I didn't even know what journaling was, to be honest with you. I was within days of Sue's death. I couldn't sleep in the middle of the night. And I got up and I went into the office and the spare room, and I just was put to sleep. I was frustrated. I was angry. I was whatever. And I picked up a 3x5 card, a simple 3x5 card. And I just started writing on it, and just anything I felt, how mad I was, how angry I was, how much I missed her, how my life is changing. I just poured my heart out on this 3x5 card, which turned into another one and another one. And then wrote enough that I was tired and I went back to bed. And all of a sudden, this started being a routine to me. Every day, every night, at the end of the day, I'd go into my spare bedroom and pull out a 3x5 card and write on it. Well, I started doing this every day. By the end of the first year, I wrote like 250 of these cards I filled. And I still didn't know I was journaling. Till one time I was at work, and a friend of mine, I was telling him that one thing that has helped me a lot is putting my feelings down on 3x5 cards. And they looked at me and they said, "Well, you're journaling." I said, "That's journaling?" And they said, "Yes, that's journaling. You're doing it." And for Christmas, the first Christmas after she died, I got a journal from that friend. They gave me a journal book, and then I started writing in that book from that point on, and I haven't stopped since. So I've been journaling for 18 years. Never did it before, but that journaling has helped me so much, incredibly so much, to be able to put your thoughts to a pen, to a paper, and just let it go. Just write your heart out. Just get it all out. That has been the key, another key to my grief journey. And of course, those journal entries come into stories, into reflections that I write in the newsletter, wrote in the books, and eventually turned into books about what I journaled. So they all work their way to help other people.
So tell us more about your books and how many you've written and your new book. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. The first book is called Miss You Forever. And Miss You Forever is the first book I wrote about. And basically, that book is a collection of reflections of all those things that I wrote, just short little stories about my life with Sue, things I remember the most, things I miss the most. And it's the first book, and it's a book that came from the support group, where I've had people say, when they would read the newsletter, they'd read my article, my reflection in the newsletter, and they'd often say something like, "Where can we find one place with all of your writing?" And I'd say, well, unless you get the newsletter, there really isn't one place with it all. And then I started thinking, maybe there should be a place for it to be. And this is before my website and everything else. And that was how Miss You Forever came up, because I thought maybe I should get all those reflections and put them together in a book. So that was kind of what was behind Miss You Forever. So at the end of Miss You Forever, I paused and I thought about my grief timeline. All of us have a separate grief timeline, how we go through from the time of the loss as we progress through our grief. And I thought maybe I should put in the back of Miss Your Forever my grief timeline, and just a short little synopsis of my grief by year. So that's what I did. And I categorized it and I put a little thing at the end. Well, after that came out, I started looking at that grief timeline and I started thinking maybe that grief timeline should be more detail about what I went through, about my move to another state, my search for forgiveness, how important how my dog was to me, my move back, and what I did from that, and how I moved forward. So, with those thoughts, I took the grief timeline from that first book at the end, and I turned it into book number 2, In a Heartbeat. And in book number 2, it takes you for the entire grief timeline from the time the accident happened all the way up to 2019. So it gives you a very detailed approach about my experiences, my emotions, my thoughts, my feelings, my observations. And both of those two books, they contain entries from my journal. And I took actual verbatim entries that I wrote throughout the course of this grief journey, and I just put them in those 2 books. Some people have commented that means the most to them because they're reading what I wrote at the time I was feeling it, and it resonated with them. Some think that's the best part, the entries from my journals that is included. So anyway, the third book and the most recent that just came out, Life Changes While Grieving. This third book is now available anywhere books are sold. And what it is it's a hybrid, if you will, of books 1 and 2. I thought the best reflections of book 1, along with an abbreviated grief timeline from book 2, and I called it Life Changes While Grieving, 3 Significant Changes, 1 Ultimate Outcome, is what the title basically is. And I took that grief timeline and I picked out what are the 3 significant changes along it that made a difference in me moving forward. And I talk about the forgiveness factor. Hal, of course, is always mentioned in the book. And I also talk about moving forward even after Hal passed away and how difficult that was for me as well. So 3 significant changes, 1 ultimate outcome: comfort, peace, and grace in life's journey.
Mm. And that's beautiful. Comfort, peace, and grace. And how would you say, what has restored comfort, peace, and grace for you?
I think a lot of it is trying to be acceptance of what occurred to me, and trying to focus more on how incredibly fortunate and lucky I am to have met somebody like Sue, fall in love with her, and have, although a very short but wonderful life with her, and to be grateful for that, and to focus more on the gratefulness of my life with her than the difficulty of my life without her. Mm. And I think that helps me get through every day with that gratefulness, and trying to practice self-care with meditation, with walks among nature, seeing the world differently, looking at the world in a different perspective, and sometimes just being present in the moment.
Thank you for sharing that, Dominic. It's I have had the privilege, in all honesty, of facilitating some groups of widows, and I I am not somebody, I don't that hasn't had a long-term marriage or relationship with somebody, like the relationship you've had with Susan, and the relationships that I hear about with the widows who come to my support groups. And there's something for me that I find really beautiful by listening to those relationships, because they're, even though there's so much pain and sadness because of the grief, they had these amazing relationships. And it's really inspiring to me to know that people have that love and connection. And of course, it's tragic that it doesn't last as long as you would like it to. And I had one group. I try and encourage my groups to create a name for themselves. Like, I only do small groups, so they're quite intimate. And that this one group, they called themselves the princesses or something like that, because they all had shared this experience that their husbands really treated them like queens and princesses. Like, these were really great men, and they had beautiful marriages. And I love to hear about that, even though it's also shrouded in the sadness. So yeah, for people who might be listening and wondering, where the silver lining is, that is what you've just shared, the silver lining. But it doesn't mean we get to that place immediately. We get to that place with lots of time and work. And
yes, absolutely. It does take time. And you have to be patient. And as a people, we're so impatient with things. We want things, we want to feel better, faster, quicker. And it's not going to work that way. You just have to give it time.
Mm-hmm. One thing I was really curious to ask you, Dominic, that I know that you said how prayer helped you. And I have a chapter in my book called Beliefs. And sometimes, in grief, our beliefs shift and change, or they are challenged. And I wondered, like, in your experience, did you have any moments where you felt like you just couldn't believe in a God, or were you always quite consistent in your beliefs?
I was always quite consistent in my belief. There were times in the very, very beginning, I kept asking why. And actually, I wrote a reflection about it in one of the books, stop asking why, because I realized that there was no answer to that. So stop asking it. And so often we want to know, why did this happen to me? Why did this happen to her or our loved one? Why now? Why this moment? Why? And I think I searched and searched for that, and I struggled with that. And then I realized you have to stop asking why. It is what it is. Life can change at the drop of a hat. Things happen we don't know why. We just move on. And I don't think I ever lost faith in God. I know a lot of people do in replacement of tragedy. I never did. I'm sure, though, there's a lot that did. And there's a lot to be angry. Some people are angry in religion about it. Other people are angry at, in my case, the driver, or another case, the doctor in the emergency room, or somebody who didn't see a test result correctly to help diagnose something. So anger is everywhere. But I truly believe in faith and hope. I'm a big person on that. Faith, hope, and trying to find the resilience to be able to go forward.
Yes, resilience is is a really great topic in itself, and how some of us have more resilience naturally than others in the face of tragic circumstances. But grief will also teach you resilience as well.
Yes.
Mm. And how would you say, just lastly, like I always like to ask my speakers, um, how you would define conscious grief?
Conscious grief to me is basically living in the present, being conscious of your feelings, not ignoring your feelings, allowing your feelings to take place, your emotions, let them out, let them flow, being conscious of your surroundings, the life around you, the people around you. Um, and, I think grief is going to be with you forever. Um, and I think, if anything, you have to learn to live with grief. If you're able to learn to live with grief consciously, then you're gonna be fine. But so many of us have to get over that hurdle.
Yeah. Thank you, Dominic. And you mentioned earlier that you do a newsletter every quarter.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, I do. I do a newsletter called Such Spirit.
Mhm.
This is the hard copy of it, but anybody could get and see all my newsletters on my website, which is just dominicmurgido.com. And basically, I've got about 5 years worth of newsletters on the website that you can go in and click on, download, read. They're always there. Come out 4 times a year, and they contain a lot of the reflections that are written in the books, as well as other people's articles. And people like the newsletter. Some people get the newsletter, look at the newsletter, never even come to one of my meetings, which is okay because the newsletter helps them. It's there for anybody. It's free to look at, as well as more information about the books on the website, about the group that I have, and of course the newsletters.
Mhm. What an amazing, amazing resource. So we will have a link to Dominic's website underneath this, and I hope that you will go and see all of that content that will be so supportive, and attend one of your groups as well. So they're every month and for free. So that's really, really amazing. Dominic, it's so wonderful to meet you, and thank you very much for being here and for everything that you do to support others.
Thank you so much, Tara. It's been my pleasure to be part of your series, and I thank you for that, and thank you for all the work you do as well.
And to everybody who's been watching, bye bye.